Night everyone, and now it's time for another bedtime story with Mary T. And tonight's story is by Patrick Pearse. It's called The Thief. One day, when the boys of Gartmore were let out from school after the Glencaha boys and the Derrybanif boys had gone east, the Turlock boys and the Inver boys stayed to have a little while's chat before separating at the Rossnagira Road. The master's house is exactly at the head of the road, in back to the hill, and it's face to Loch Ellery. I heard that the master's bees were swarming, said Mickaleen Barclay Enda. In with you into the garden till we have a look at them, said Dara Barber of the bridge. I'm afraid, said Mickaleen. What are you afraid of, said Dara. By my word, the master and the mistress will be out presently. Who'll stay to give us word when the master will be coming, says Dara. I will, said little Anthony Manning. That'll do, said Dara. Let a whistle when you see him leaving the school. In over the fence with them, in over the fence with the other boys after him. Have a care that none of you will get a sting, said Anthony. Little fear, said Dara, and off forever with them. Anthony sat on the fence and his back to the road. He could see the master over his right shoulder if he'd leave the schoolhouse. What a nice garden the master had, thought Anthony. He had rose trees and gooseberry trees and apple trees. He had little white stones round the path. He had big white stones and a pretty rockery, and moss and maiden hair fern and common fern growing between them. He had... Anthony saw a wonder greater than any wonder the master had in the garden. He saw a little beautiful wee house under the shade of one of the rose trees, it made of wood. 2 stories in it, white colour on the lower story, red colour on the upper story, a little green door on it, 3 windows of glass on it, 1 downstairs and 2 upstairs. House furniture in it, between tables and chairs and beds and delf and the rest. And says Anthony to himself, look at the lady of the house, sitting in the door. Anthony never saw a doll's house before, and it was a wonder to him, its neatness and order for a toy. He knew that it belonged to the master's little girl, little Nance. A pity that his own little sister hadn't one like it. Evelyn, the creature that was stretched out on her bed for a long 3 months, and she weak and sick. A pity she hadn't the doll itself. Anthony put the covetousness of his heart in that doll for Evelyn. He looked over his right shoulder. Neither master nor mistress was to be seen. He looked over his left shoulder. The other boys were out of sight. He didn't think the second thought. He gave his best leap from the fence. He seized the doll. He stuck it under his jacket. He clambered out over the ditch again and away with him home. I've a present for you, says he to Evelyn when he reached the house. Look! And with that he showed her the doll. There came a blush on the wasted cheeks of the little sick girl, and a light into her eyes. Oh, Anthony, love, where did you get it, says she. The master's little Nance that sent it to you for a present, said Anthony. Their mother came in. Oh, Mammeen treasure, said Evelyn. Look at the present that the master's little Nance sent me. In earnest, said the mother. Surely, said Evelyn. Anthony it was that brought it into me now. Anthony looked down at his feet and began counting the trees, the toes that were on them. My own Pat, said the mother. My own pet, said the mother. Isn't it she was so good to you? Wishing, Nance, I'll go bail that present will put great improvement on my little girl. And then came tears in the mother's eyes out of gratitude to little Nance, because she remembered the sick child. Though he wasn't able to look his mother between the eyes or at Evelyn with the dint of fear, Anthony was glad he had committed the theft. He was afraid to say his prayers that night, and he lay down on his bed without as much as an Our Father. He couldn't say the act of contrition, for it wasn't truthfully he'd be able to say to God that he was sorry for that sin. It's often he stared at the night, imagining that little Nance was coming seeking the doll from Evelyn, that the master was taxing him with the robbery before the school, that there was a miraculous swarm of bees rising against him, and Dara Barbara of the bridge and the other boys, exciting them with shouts and with the music of drama. But the next morning he said to himself, I don't care. That doll will make Evelyn better. When he went to school, the boys asked him why he went off unawares the evening before that, and he, after promising them he'd keep watch. My mother sent for me, said Anthony. She'd a task for me. When little Nance came into the school, Anthony looked at her under his brows. He fancied that she'd been after crying. He thought that he saw the track of the tears on her cheeks. The first time the master called him by his name, he jumped, because he thought he was going to tax him with the fault, or to cross-question him about the doll. He never put in as miserable a day that day in school. But when he went home and saw the great improvement on Evelyn, and she sitting up in the bed for the first time in a month, and the doll clasped in her arms, says he to himself, I don't care. The doll is making Evelyn better. In his bed in the night time, he had bad dreams again. He thought that the master was after telling the police that he stole the doll, and that they were on his track. He imagined one time there was a policeman hiding under the bed, and that there was another hankering behind the window curtain. He screamed out in his sleep. What's on you? Said his father to him. The peeler that's going to take me, said Anthony. You're only rambling, boy, said his father to him. There's no peeler in it. Go to sleep. There was the misery of the world on the poor fellow from that out. He used to think they would be pointing fingers at him and he go on the road. He used to think they would be shaking their heads and saying to each other, there's a thief. Or did you hear that Anthony Porrick Mannion did? Her doll he stole from the master's little Nance. Now what do you say? But he didn't suffer rightly till he went to Mass on Sunday, until Father Ronan started preaching it, a sermon on the 7th commandment. Thou shalt not steal, and if you commit a theft, it will not be forgiven you until you make restitution. Anthony was full sure it was a mortal sin. He knew that he ought to go to confession and tell the sin to the priest. But he couldn't go to confession, for he knew that the priest would say to him that he must give the doll back, and he couldn't give the doll back. He hardened his heart, and he said that he'd never give the doll back, for that doll was making Evelyn better every day. One evening he was sitting by the bed foot in serious talk with Evelyn, when his mother ran in a hurry and says, Here's the mistress and little Nance coming up the boreen. Anthony wished the earth could open and swallow him. His face was red up to his 2 ears. He was in a sweat. He wasn't able to say a word or to think a thought, but these words were running through his head. They'll take the doll from Evelyn. It was all the same to you what they'd say, or what they'd do to himself. The only answer he'd have would be, the doll's making Evelyn better. The mistress and little Nance came into the room. Anthony got up. He couldn't look at them in the face. He began at his old clatter, counting the toes of his feet. 5 on each foot, 4 toes and a big toe, or 3 toes, a big toe and a little toe. That's 5. Twice 5 or 10, 10 in all. He couldn't add to their number or take from them. His mother was talking and the mistress was talking, but Anthony paid no heed to them. He was waiting till something would be said about the doll. There was nothing for him to do till that but count his toes. 1, 2, 3. What was that? Evelyn was referring to the doll. Anthony listened now. Wasn't it good of you to send me the doll? She said to Nance. From the day Anthony brought it into me, a change began coming on me. It did that, says her mother. We'll be forever grateful to you for that same doll you sent to her. May God increase your store, and may he require you for it 1,000 times. Requite you for it 1,000 times. Neither Nance nor the mistress spoke. Anthony looked at Nance shyly. His 2 eyes were stuck on the doll, for the doll was lying cosy in the bed beside Evelyn. It had its mouth half open, and the wonder of the world on it in the sayings of Evelyn and her mother. It's with trouble I believed Anthony when he brought it into me, said Evelyn, and when he told me you sent it to me as a present. Nance looked over at Anthony. Anthony lifted his head slowly, and their eyes met. It will never be known what Nance read in Anthony's eyes. What Anthony read in Nance's eyes was mercy, love, and sweetness. Nance spoke to Evelyn. Do you like it? Says she. Over anything, says Evelyn. I'd rather it than anything I have in the world. I have the little house it lives in, said Nance. I must send it to you. Anthony will bring it to you tomorrow. Oh, says Evelyn, and she clapping her two little thin palms together. You'll miss it, love, said Evelyn's mother to Nance. No, said Nance. It will put more improvement on Evelyn. I have lots of things. Let her do it, Codge, said the mistress to the mother. Oh, you're too good, said the poor woman. Anthony thought that it's dreaming he was, or he thought that it's not a person of this world, little Nance was at all, but an angel come down out of heaven. He wanted to go on his knees to her. When the mistress and little Nance went off, Anthony ran out the back door and tore across the garden so that he'd be before them at the Boreen foot and they going out on the road. Nance, says he, I stole the doll. Never mind, Anthony, said Nance. You did good to Evelyn. Anthony stood like a stake in the road. He couldn't speak another word. Isn't it he was proud bringing the doll's house home to Evelyn after school the next day? And isn't it they had the fun that evening settling the house and polishing the furniture and putting the doll to sleep in its little bed? The Saturday following, Anthony went to confession and told his sin to the priest. The penance the priest put on him was to clean the doll's house once in the week for Evelyn, till she would be strong enough to clean it herself. Evelyn was strong enough for it by the end of the month. By the end of another month she was at school again. There wasn't a Saturday evening from that out that they couldn't hear a little light tapping at the master's door. On the mistress going out, Anthony would be standing at the door. Here's a little present for Nance, he'd say, stretching towards her half a dozen duck's eggs, or a bunch of heather, or at the least, the full of his fist of dúlaishc, and then he'd rush off with them without giving the mistress time to say thank you. Well, good night and stay safe.